Okay, so welcome everyone to our third session in this series of interviews with the future leaders, and they're interviewing leaders in data. So just a bit of background to why we're doing these sessions. So the RSS has received funding from the Academy of Social Sciences to help our commitment in promoting diversity and inclusion within statistics, data science, and related professions. The program has been launched to help support data professionals from ethnic minority backgrounds to become future leaders. And it's motivated by the phrase of "you cannot be what you cannot see." And as part of some of the initial work we've done with the future leaders, the cohort of members that we've recruited, leadership skills was one of the pivotal things that kept coming up in terms of items they wanted to learn more about and how they could become leaders in data, the skills they would need, the experiences, and also the soft skills and where they could find that information. So we developed a series of interviews with individuals that are identified as leaders in data. I'm really pleased to say that today's interview is with we've got Dr. Andrew Garrett and Dr. Sarah Cumbers. So if I could just ask Andrew to start with just give a brief introduction to yourself, and then Sarah, and then Edith, if you could follow with an introduction to you as our future leader for today, please.
Okay, hi. So I'm Andy Garrett. I'm currently president of the Royal Statistical Society. I have a 2-year term that finishes in December 2024. My main job is working in the pharmaceutical industry, of which I've been working there for around about 40 years as a statistician and as a business leader.
And I'm Sarah Cumbers, and I'm the Chief Exec at the Royal Statistical Society. I've been in post for just over a year now.
Great. I'm Edith Melanzi. I am a biostatistician at IQVIA, and I am also a Royal Statistical Society's Future Leaders Fellow. Thank you.
Thank you all. So now we'll begin the session. I'll step into the background and then I'll take some notes, and you'll see me pop up again at the end. So Edith, if I could hand over to you to take away with the questions, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you once again to both of you for making time to join us today. So I'm going to ask you to give a longer introduction of yourselves. So an introduction to your career, up to date, and also the trajectories that you have taken within statistics and within data, and how, if at all of that has differed from an original dream, what you wanted to be when you were growing up and where you are now. Can I start with you, Dr. Garrett?
Yeah, so thank you, Edith. So I'm from Liverpool originally. So as you would expect, my career, what I wanted to be when I wanted to grow up was a footballer. So I wanted to play for Liverpool. And if I went back to my days of early days as a statistician, what did I used to do? I used to have a goal book, actually. Sad to say, but I used to have a goal and used to say how many goals I'd scored with my left foot, my right foot, and my head when I was playing for the school and various things. So I should have known maybe from those early days that really my true calling was going to be a statistician. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was at school and even going to university. And in fact, if anything, I had a place to go and do architecture, would you believe? So I could have been an architect. And I think it probably could have been quite a few different things. And I'm a great believer in there are many different paths that you can take, you'd be happy in. But it's interesting about architecture, because actually when I work as a statistician, I'm very interested in design. And I think you can split statisticians up into those that really like the messy analyses and those that hate the messy analyses, but really like the sort of the clean data being generated. So I'm a design statistician. So I think that comes a little bit from that idea of maybe I wanted to be an architect in my early days. But I went to university. Actually, I studied economics originally as well. And it's interesting that I work now a little bit more in the business side. So I enjoyed economics, but I sort of fell into statistics a little bit around doing my 3rd-year project on Box-Jenkins modeling for time series with a very interesting and enthusiastic tutor I had at Leicester University. And that really got me in statistics. I didn't really like statistics before that, doing some modeling. I then went on and did an MSc in medical statistics. And then I joined the pharmaceutical industry, working for pharmaceutical companies and also CROs, which is where you work, Edith. And it's interesting to see you are now at IQVIA, and I was at what was Quintiles for 20 years. So I worked in the industry as a statistician, working my way up. And actually, when I was at Quintiles, which is, as you'll know, a pharmaceutical service provider, I was managing a group of around about 1,000 statisticians and programmers at the time, including medical affairs and regulatory. So I think what it showed is that effectively you can move from being a statistician through to many other areas and grow groups at scale. So I moved from being a sort of design statistician to essentially being more of a business leader and managing large teams who were delivering for lots of different customers. And then I actually moved on from Quintiles at the time, now IQVIA, to Icon. And in Icon, I do actually even a broader role there. So I've been managing groups in things like clinical supplies management, regulatory, imaging, pharmacovigilance, medics, etc. And all of those have data quantitative components. So it's been quite interesting taking those statistical skills and using them in many different areas of the business and understanding the science. But I think statistics is a brilliant base topic. It's a brilliant core topic to take you many different areas.
Thank you so much. I can already picture the insights that you have from the different types of positions you've had, and also obviously the different experiences that you've had along working in those areas. I'd like to hear from you as well, Dr. Cumbers. What has been your trajectory like, and if at all that differed from what you originally wanted to be?
Thank you, Edith. I don't think I had such a strong calling as Andy had to football when I was younger, but I certainly enjoyed maths and science at school. I did A-level statistics, which I don't think was particularly common at that time. And I went on to do a degree in biochemistry and thought I wanted to be a lab scientist. I wanted to be a research scientist, and obviously, sort of use statistics as part of that. I didn't enjoy my PhD as much, I will say. The bit I really enjoyed was the write-up at the end. I found working on the bench quite frustrating. That experiments didn't often go to plan, particularly working with cell culture that I was doing at the time. And so I finished my PhD with my write-up, and I really enjoyed writing essentially an introduction to the history of immunology, and decided that I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to work in science communication. And so I went to work for a medical communications agency in the city in London as my first job. And some of it was very rewarding, but a major part of that was developing promotional monographs on antidepressants in the years before the SSRI scandal. And I felt really uncomfortable being part of that and essentially being asked to massage the data for commercial gain. And I left the company within a year, having learned a great deal about the potential misuse of data and the importance of, I think at that time, it was the first real sort of clash of personal values that I had in the workplace. And so I learned about the importance of choosing a job that really aligns with your personal values. And so my second role then was for a small healthcare charity. I worked as their education coordinator, but it was a charity that was beset with issues when I arrived. I think the CEO had possibly already resigned just before I started, and my experience there was of an organisation that didn't have strong leadership in place, and I was still quite new in my career and wanted to learn, and I wanted to develop. I wanted to be developed, and so I think that job really taught me about the importance of good management and leadership, and provided the impetus for me to learn how to do it and to do it well. Through learning through that void, and then my career really took a major turn when I joined NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or Clinical Excellence as it was at that time, and I stayed at NICE for 16 years, so a large part of my career. And the organisation changed and grew and developed during that time, and I did as well. I started as a project manager, and I left as a programme director, so in quite a senior position. And I really loved it. And I found an organisation that really aligned with my values. Obviously, strong use of data and evidence to inform decision making that is relevant to all of us in terms of the drugs that are funded on prescription and how conditions, both clinically and also prevention in relation to public health, are managed within the NHS and wider services. And so I stayed there for a number of years. I then went to work for a small funding charity, Lloyd's Register Foundation. So that was my first director post, and that was really the first time in my career that I'd got my own, a larger team to manage and could set strategy for a team, and I really enjoyed that opportunity. But ultimately, I wanted to lead as a chief exec, and that was when I then joined the RSS, as I said, about a year ago now, and enabled me to put those elements together of leadership and obviously the importance of data and statistics in supporting decision making, and that's where I am now. So does that really align with the original dream? I'm not sure that I really had very much of a dream at the time, but I've certainly enjoyed the journey that I've been on.
I would say it's essentially the same thing. If you enjoy it, then it's a dream. Thank you so much. So still on you, Dr. Cumbers, and I like the timing of this interview because you may know that tomorrow is the International Day for Women in Statistics and Data Science. And you, as a woman in a traditionally male-dominated field, I mean, even from where you're coming from, your PhD in immunology, I think STEM is still male-dominated in general. And I wanted to know whether you feel like you had to approach certain aspects of your career differently in order for you to be able to stand out and, be where you are now. And if that's the case, what strategies or what actions did you find most effective in doing that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Edith. And it's great to be celebrating women in data tomorrow. It certainly has shaped my career. When I joined the lab that I was doing my PhD in, there was a Nobel Prize awarded, I think, within my first week, to a scientist along the corridor. And there were many, many very strong male leaders within the institute. There weren't as many female leaders, and it was something that I felt very keenly. I'm not sure I really realised that at the time because it wasn't something that was really consciously talked about as much. It just wasn't as prominent as it is today. But I did think it had a major impact. I knew that I wanted to, to have a personal life as well, to have a family, and there weren't, female scientists that were, within the lab who had managed to get that balance right that I could see that were visible. And I think it did have an impact on me and that decision to leave, bench science. I would say then in terms of, how I've approached it, I think because EDI wasn't, such a, so obvious, when I was starting my career, I don't think I've done anything consciously different. But what I would say is that when I was working at NICE, I was really fortunate to benefit from the support and guidance of a number of really strong female leaders. So as I say, I don't think it was conscious to have done anything differently as a woman. But what I would say is that I have definitely learned from some very strong women in positions of leadership, and that has really helped me. And so I would say that, you asked about sort of strategies or actions that I found most effective. I'd say find a leader who you identify with and who shares your value and purpose, and then learn from them. And I think that's been really effective for me.
Thank you. I mean, that also aligns with what this the Future Leaders program is trying to do, trying to develop leaders from that are underrepresented right now, and that's why obviously we are trying to have this interview with you so that we can learn from how we should be able to do that. So Dr. Garrett, I'll start with you with this question. I want you to imagine that I am your younger self, and what advice would you give me about career development and where to find support?
Yeah, it's interesting when you say go back and look at your younger self, because I'm one of those people, actually, one of my best bits of advice is don't look back. I always think it's really important to look forward, and you have so many different paths that you can take. And wherever you are, there's always something else you can do. So I'm just a great believer that there's lots of routes to happiness, lots of routes to being fulfilled career-wise, and you should just be open to the opportunities ahead of you rather than worrying too much about what you could have done better because the past has gone. But on saying that, I mean, the one area I would say that I don't think I really appreciated when I was maybe at university and in the early days of my career was the importance of sort of building a network. So the importance of just sharing opinions, sharing views with other people. And I think the more your career develops, the more you understand the importance of being collegial, collaborative. And that's very much, where the RSS is. If you look at the RSS values now, one of those is about being about collaborative, because statistics is so ubiquitous. You can play in so many different areas. And I think it's just a great opportunity to just talk to people, be very open. So the advice to people, and I think that's what I've sort of done over time. I think I have sort of worked in many different areas and been very open. And that's the most, or the best advice I could give to people would be just, be confident, go out there, talk to whoever is willing to talk to you. Most people are really generous with your time, but take advantage of the people that are willing to share their views with you, and just build that network up, and that'll stand you in very good stead for the future. So that'd be my advice.
Thank you so much. I just want to build up on some of what you said about how, the statistics is quite so broad that it can take you anywhere. But at what point do you feel you can decide that this is actually what I want to do with statistics? I'm asking this question because as an early career researcher myself and an early statistician, I mean, I think I was in academia, so now I'm in the industry, but I'm still like, is this where I want to be, or do I still want to go back, or maybe there's something else I want to try? At what point do you decide that this is actually where I want to go, and then you take that route until you're in there for a long time?
I think do what you enjoy doing, and I think that'll guide you. That'll be your North Star. Is you tend to be attracted to the things that you enjoy doing. And I mean, when you say you're in academia, that you then come into industry, I don't think that would be a question of going back into academia. It would be a question of moving to academia and doing something different in academia. So I think you can keep progressing, but follow different paths. So there's not one direct path that you have to take. You can go a little bit to the side, or just keep on moving forward. So I think it's that. I mean, I say fundamentally as a statistician, I think I would divide people into the people that really enjoy analysis and the people that really enjoy the design of things. And I think that is a big difference between people. I find that a very difference in the mindset and people, how they work together on these things. So I mean, I think I haven't seen many people who probably switch between the two. They either go more design and then they take it into how they work maybe as managers and how they work as leaders. They always have that design mindset, that planning mindset. And then you'll have the other group of people that just naturally, they really enjoy more the messiness and problem solving, and they'll always be attracted to that type of work, whether it's in academia or whether it's in industry or whatever. So I think to me, that from a statistician's point of view, it is those two sort of different types of what they enjoy doing more than anything else. And I think it's finding something that you enjoy doing, because you spend so much of your time at work. And even when you're volunteering, you have to enjoy the volunteering, because it's hard to fit that into your day job. I mean, I did a part-time PhD, for instance, and I did that because when I was at Quintiles, because I was doing interesting things and I wanted to put it towards something that was a bit more sort of structured. But I never, I did it because I enjoyed doing it, not because I felt I needed to do it. And I think always follow follow your instincts on these things. Do what you enjoy doing, because you have to spend so much of your time doing it. If you don't enjoy it, move on to something different.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. And I like that you have repeated that takeaway message, because that's what I'm taking away from your response now. Dr. Cumbers, do you have any advice that you would give to your younger self about career development? And if you do, what would that be? And what would you encourage? Where would you encourage them to find support?
Thanks, Edith. I mean, so much of what Andy said then resonates with me. I mean, certainly, needing to enjoy what you're doing, that is really, really important. I think being flexible, not feeling, I mean, I stayed at NICE for 16 years, and arguably, sometimes I look back and think, what would my career have been like if I hadn't done that? And it's not that I regret it, but I can see there could have been a different path as well. So, don't ever feel that you're sort of stuck, or that there's, look at things flexibly, and feel that you can move around and get different experience, particularly early on in your career. The other thing that Andy said that really resonated with me was around talking to people and the importance of network. And I think LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for keeping in touch with people. It wasn't available my first couple of jobs, and so I don't have a network from there, but certainly in more recent years, it's just a fantastic way of just making sure that you still have that ability to reach out. And I always think, actually I could talk to this particular person about this issue, or that's where I need to go for advice on this. And it's so easy just to continue to reach out to people. And then the final thing that really resonated was around people enjoying giving advice and support. And I think that's probably what I would say to my younger self. Now that I've reached that stage where people do come to me to ask for support, the message that I would want to give is that I enjoy doing that, and that I always learn from the experience of talking to other people, and feel enriched personally by mentoring relationships. I get a lot out of talking to people who are, less well advanced in their career. And I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a senior leader when they don't say the same thing, that they don't also enjoy it or feel that it's time that's worth investing. And so I think the advice would be, don't be shy. If there's somebody that you think actually would be really useful to get their support or their perspective on something, then ask, because it's likely that they will enjoy talking to you and that they'll get something out of supporting you as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cumbers, for your response. And thank you. I also like that most of what Dr. Garrett has mentioned has resonated with you. So it seems that probably this is one of the most, I want to say common, but also quite important things to consider as you go through your career trajectory. Dr. Garrett, you did mention about how you spent time volunteering, and I have read that you've done significant volunteering within the Royal Statistical Society, but also other organizations. And I want to understand how this experience has influenced your career growth, and also how it has helped develop your leadership skills. So I would like you to also unpack this question in the context of how you balanced your volunteering activities with, for example, the main job that you had at that particular time.
Yeah, no, interesting question. And we should just say, just call me Andy. We're all very informal, so I should have said that at the very beginning. And maybe just pick up on Sarah's point there about just before I get into it, is around. And it really resonated with me about you when you talk to people, even if you're mentoring them or coaching them, you get an awful lot out of it yourself. And that is certainly true. It's that two-way process. And I think that ties into me with this whole idea of volunteering. Because actually I think you get more out of it than you actually give. And sometimes it feels like, oh, you're giving an awful lot of time, but you're getting so much back. And it is, in many ways, it is just the conversations that you're having and what you're being exposed to. And whoever you're speaking to, at whatever level, you'll always find something out. So if you're curious and most of us are, you want to find out why they're asking that question or what they're trying to do. And I think if you're curious and you're interested about what people do, you gain from almost every interaction that you have. So as I say, what Sarah said really resonates with me there. So first of all, I think the brilliant thing about volunteering is that you get more out of it than you put in. And then it's a question of how do you fit it in with the job? And it is quite difficult. I mean, you work for a CRO, and so you'll know a little bit about variety. So you work with lots of different customers. And I think when you work for a CRO, you're used to that sort of variety of work. And I think when you're volunteering, it's almost it's a bit like that on steroids, so you're essentially have just lots of variety. So in the RSS role, although I'm doing a reasonably big job outside of the RSS role, I actually love the variety of it. So there's always something coming in from the RSS, and it breaks up your day and it gets you thinking and all those sort of things. So there's everything that comes in. There's always an interesting angle on it where you can learn a little bit about it. So I think the key thing for me is you have to regard this as being an opportunity rather than a problem. They're all great things to have. You can stop volunteering anytime you want, and we do it because we really enjoy it and you gain a lot from it. And then how you fit it in, well, some of it is around just you do a few more hours. You have to be a little bit flexible and agile with your time. But it's like trying to fit in anything, whether you're fitting in going to the gym or going to the cinema or whatever. I mean, it enriches your life by being busy and doing things and by learning things. So I've always taken it as being it's a privilege to have the opportunity to do these things. And if I wanted to stop, I can stop. But you keep on going essentially. I mean, in terms of skills that you learn along the way, I mean, certainly things like chairing meetings is quite interesting. So if you're used to chairing meetings in either environment, you learn from that. So chairing a meeting in a professional environment, you can take that back to how you do it back in your day job, and vice versa in your day job, how you do it with a society. And understanding the different dynamics, for instance, of working with volunteers who don't have to do this, it's through their time, versus working with, say, employees. They're employed and maybe have to be at the meeting. They don't have any choice. So again, understanding the nuances there, I think, of managing meetings. So some of it is very basic, like have an agenda, make sure you do things on time, make sure you have actions. But getting people to commit to doing the work can be very different in a volunteer environment than, say, working for a company or working in government. So I think the more you do, the broader you do, the broader exposure you have, then you end up with a more robust way of handling different situations. So that by working in many different areas, it just improves your leadership skills more generally. It makes you more robust to the whole process. So I think that in terms of what have I learned from doing both the volunteering and the main job, it's more just a broader view, a more robust ability to manage, and probably understanding more the nuances of different working people in different ways is really important.
Thank you so much. So my takeaway from that is that us as future leaders should also look towards spending time volunteering in different organizations to sort of get how, first of all, how different organizations work, but also how you would develop your skills in different areas other than what we're doing in our day job. So thank you so much for that insight.
Edith, if I
Dr.
could just,
Cumbers? Yes,
if I can just chime in, and again, please call me Sarah, that we've got loads of opportunities at the RSS for volunteering. I mean, Andy, do you remember what your first role was and how long ago that was? I know you've been volunteering for the RSS for quite some time, haven't you?
I'm trying to remember. I was involved in PSI, which was probably before that, and I think my first formal role was probably on council. but I very quickly, I think, worked out that being on council, because there was only 3 or 4 meetings a year, you didn't really feel that involved. And it wasn't until I got involved in actually, I think, running sections and local groups as the honorary officer that I started to feel more part of it. And instead of just coming to meetings and contributing, I was actually getting involved in the activities. So I do think with all the societies is if you are going to get involved properly, throw yourself in, and you'll get far more out of it by doing that rather than being a little bit on the periphery. So
Yeah.
it's always better to throw yourself in a little bit. And if you make a mistake, people don't mind. It's not the end of the world, and we all make mistakes, and it's just try your best, go in, learn, and that's what everyone else is doing. Everyone's in the same situation.
And if listeners are wondering how they can get involved with the RSS and volunteering, we've got a web page dedicated to opportunities, so check it out.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think the media team has actually done a very good job trying to raise awareness of these opportunities within the RSS. So yeah, I would like to thank you for bringing that up. So still with you, Sarah. I would like to ask you about your earliest memory in your career where you took over a leadership position. So either of a particular project, and how did you approach that situation in the first instance? What lessons did you draw from them, and if there's any that you can share?
I think I've always enjoyed organising things and leading things, ever since I was a kid, and then at university getting involved in things like I ran the college bar when I was there for a year, and then when I did my PhD, involvement in the Graduate Society. So I suppose it was no surprise I think it was in my second job that when staff were not happy with the way the office was working, sort of physically, in terms of how we were occupying the space, and felt it needed to change. That we didn't have an office manager at the time; the organisation was too small. So I just stepped right in and said, right, we're going to do something about this. It was a really keen learning experience, though. I was surprised by the strength of feeling in some of the staff. Actually, work environment is one of those things that is really, really important to people. And because I was so new to the office, I don't think I really appreciated that at the time. And so I learned, that it's really important to openly consult with people and give them the opportunity to feedback their views on change before it happens, as it really helps to build understanding. So I think that's what I got out of that experience.
Thank you. And I would imagine that, also consulting with people also helps you to sort of gain different perspectives that you wouldn't be able to see in the first place, and being able to incorporate that into the whole process. And I can resonate with that as well. Andy, do you remember the first time you took over a leadership project, and how did that go?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm going to talk about here. The first one actually was my first job. I was the first statistician that they'd employed in a very small pharma company. And it was the days, well, you can imagine, the days before they had proper computers and things like that. So I had to do the data management, I had to do the stats, I had to do the programming, I had to do the medical writing. And there was nobody else really to ask about. In the days, you had to actually load the data with a cassette, would you believe? There was no email or anything like that. You couldn't look up things on Wikipedia or Google, etc. So you had to go back to your textbooks and things like that. So that was actually the first time almost I started work. I had to lead a project. So that was really, really weird. But I wouldn't advise anybody to do it particularly that way. But it was good for confidence, because you had to sort of do it, independently and look things up. But maybe the best example was in working for a pharmaceutical company was when we were developing some new antibiotics or new antibiotic. And it was the time, I think in the late 80s and the early 90s, when clinical trials in anti-infectives had really been non-comparative. So you just gave the antibiotic to a group of patients and you looked at the result. And it started to move for the first time to doing randomized controlled clinical trials. It was properly defining the endpoints. It was using something called non-inferiority methodology, which was fairly new at the time. It was always about, before that, it was very much about showing the difference between treatment groups. Now it was showing equivalence within a certain a certain bound, a certain confidence interval, etc. So that was a really exciting time, because with guidelines were coming out from the FDA, and it was, do you look at absolute differences or do you look at relative differences, and how do you do covariate adjustments? And I think the thing about that was I was leading the statistics design. I talked before about being a design statistician. So we were really designing these new studies for antibiotics about how they should be done in the future. And we were taking the guidelines that were coming out, we were trying to influence the guidelines, and it was a great team effort. And I think that's the point I would get about this, is even when you're leading from, say, the statistics side on a project, you're also working in a multidisciplinary team. So you've got the clinical people, you've got the microbiologists, you've got other researchers that are choosing the sites. And in those days, not all studies were global studies. I mean, they were often regional. Again, it was the days before there was really the internet and email. So a lot of these things were being done by telephone conversation. But it was a really exciting time. And I think it is the leadership there is more around determining the direction of travel, where research is going, being on top of the research, being on top of what the regulators are requiring, and then working with all your colleagues in all those other parts of the organization to come up with a really, really sound program that you can stand behind. And then again, the great thing about being a design statistician is you then get to see the data coming out at the end, and has it been generated in the way that you'd hoped? So I think that was probably the first one I really felt like I was sort of leading from the front in terms of the design.
Was that easy for you to do?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't easy, but it was exciting to do, because you have to make decisions, and you can't sit on the fence, and you have to be confident about how you're interpreting the guidelines. You have to be confident on how you can take maybe some of the designs from other therapeutic areas where it was more well established into a new area, like anti-infectives, where they weren't using some of these methodologies. And certainly the non-inferiority methodology and the absolute versus relative effects, that was, you had to be quite confident, but it also meant you had to research quite well. You had to do a lot of background reading, etc. So it was difficult, but it was also incredibly rewarding, I think, to be doing that. And then, of course, when you design things, you never quite know what's going to happen at the end. So you have to wait for the data to come through to see whether you've been successful or not. So it was really interesting.
I'm glad to hear you say that it was difficult, because I think what I have noticed most of the time is that if you're being prepared for a higher position, or a position where you get more responsibility and maybe manage people and things like that, it is already expected of you that you must have shown the capability of doing that before you get there. And I think at least from my experience, sometimes it is expected that because you have shown that capability, you will sort of ease into that. But so that's why I asked that question, and I'm glad to hear you say it was difficult, because I think sometimes it's very easy for somebody, for one, to take things hard because they have shown that capability, but when they get there, it seems sort of hard to pin down how to do what and when to do what. But I can imagine that it also takes time, and with experience, obviously, that improves over time. So I'm really glad to hear you say it was difficult at first, but obviously you've managed to get around that, considering where you are now.
Can I come back? Can I come back a little bit on that? Because I think you've
Sure.
raised a really interesting topic, particularly when you work in a technical area like statistics, is how much do you have to earn the right to sort of be a manager, and how much do you need to know technically? And this is always the challenge. I mean, how much do you need to be a good technical statistician in your area? It could be design, could be analysis, and how much is it more about management skills? And I think it's a bit of a mixture of things. So I do think there is a certain credibility area where it's actually good to know some of the technical. However, our area is so broad that you can't be an expert in every single area. And even in clinical trials, as you'll know, Edith, that what you might do for oncology might be very different to what you do for anti-infectives, might be very different to what you do for rare diseases. And there's probably nobody working in medical statistics that knows all the different areas. And then you get to epidemiology. So when you're moving into management and you're managing big groups of people, you have to accept that you're not going to be the technical expert. And I think it's more around knowing what questions to ask and knowing the checks and balances. So that the way I operate is very much around knowing what to ask people and knowing how to probe, but recognizing that they're the experts, not me, and I don't have to be the expert in all these areas. And I think that's when you get into leadership positions and more advanced leader positions, you have to be prepared to let go and acknowledge that there are people that are much better than you at these various things. But that's not your role anymore. Your role is to get the best out of everybody. That's a very different type of thing. But I think as a statistician, you do, maybe technical people do naturally want to stick with the technical bit. And there's a natural thing to always want to be the expert. And I think in leadership, at the end, you have to let that go.
Thank you for providing that addition. And I think you have already probably preempted some of my next questions, but I'm still going to ask because, okay, now that we're talking about leadership positions, before I come to the question you have preempted, I want to understand for both of you how important it is that you identify ways to develop future leaders within your teams and how each of you are approaching this. Can I start with you, Sarah?
Thanks, Edith, and it's vitally important. It's really a really important part of management, and just building on what Andy just said. You have to put faith in people and give them the confidence to take steps to do things that they haven't tried before, because that's the only way that we can all develop. We all have to start somewhere, and we all have to do things for the first time, and it's about making sure that support is in place. And for me, the most effective tool in doing that is regular one-to-one. As a manager, and I've worked in organisations that don't see the value in that, and I have always used regular one-to-ones with my direct reports, not just as an opportunity to find out what's happened and what's coming up, but as an important opportunity to reflect and learn. It's not something that should only happen as part of an annual appraisal. It's something that needs to be part of the fabric of conversations every day, to have the confidence and the trust to be able to say something hasn't worked, and this is what I've learned from it, and if I was going to do this differently next time, this is what I would try, and to talk about that with somebody who might have trodden that path before and might have something valuable to add, or they might not, but it's important to give that space for the reflection and the learning, and then the support, and as I say, I think trust is a really important part of that, and that's what I try to build through regular one-to-ones with people that I manage, and to bring them on as leaders through that process.
So building up on that, do you ever get a sense of, for example, if you need them to do something and you're actually not sure if they're able to do that, do you ever feel like you can do it quicker yourself, but still have to explain to the future leader we're talking about on how they would have needed to go about doing that work, or you let them do it? And then if there are missteps, you have to come in and say, actually, you should have planned it this way.
I would always want it to be a conversation and a balance between, what I need and want and what the individual needs and wants. As a leader, you have to delegate. You shouldn't have capacity to be able to do everything, because that's not what working in collaboration with a team is about. And you end up weaker as an organisation if you do that. You end up with a single point of failure. Something happens. So it is really important to have confidence in people, but to have that conversation and to say, you know, do you feel ready? What is it that you need? You know, what support do you need to put in place, you know, to enable you to do this work? So yeah, that would be my approach.
Thank you. And I think I should say I appreciate, because this is what the RSS is doing with the Future Leaders program, actually. So when we met for the first time in London, like, we had a thorough discussion of what really we wanted to do with the program. And like Rick mentioned, that, you know, leadership was one of the themes that came out. And I'm really glad that we've had this opportunity to sort of pick your brains on how you have managed to reach where you are. And also because I also know that you are pretty much in the driving seat of these kind of programs, trying to get more people into leadership positions, but more especially more people that are underrepresented. And how about you, Andy?
Yeah, so I agree with what Sarah said. I mean, and I'm going to try not to duplicate what she said. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack on it. So I'm going to look at maybe a little bit, how do you go deeper in an organization? And maybe relate to that a little bit to the RSS and maybe where I work at the moment with Icon. So, I mean, how do you find future leaders further down in the organization, which is quite interesting. So we do a talent review at Icon, and we're trying to identify those people with high potential based upon their performance and the potential to move it to a higher level. And I think, you know, so Sarah talked about the one-to-ones, which are absolutely vital with the team. And the other thing is skip meetings as well. So skip meetings, when you actually go one level down, I find really helpful, because you find out, it's amazing what you find out when you go one level down. About actually what's happening in an organization and the challenges that are hitting on a day-to-day basis. So actually, I find the skip meetings very helpful. But it also gives me exposure to people in the organization that are deeper down, that you think, hey, that person's really, really good. You know, I didn't really have exposure to that person, but for now, this person's really good. I need to keep an eye on that person because they could be a future leader. So I think part of it, I'd like to come more from an angle, let's say, instead of repeating what Sarah said, come from an angle which is more like, how do you go deeper into the organization, identify people with high potential, and then what do you do with them? You know, you can put them on courses and things, but one of the things is around, often you have initiatives within organizations where you're working in a multidisciplinary way. And so when people say, have you got a volunteer for this initiative? What we do is we then go down and say, well, hey, who are the people we identified as high potential? And then let's sort of get some of those people and get them to work with other groups. So increase their exposure to other people in the organization. And then see whether they're able to, you know, do these extra tasks and show their potential. So that's something that we do. It's really, I think, identifying people who you think have potential and then giving them the opportunity to shine. And if it doesn't go well, you know, that's not the end of the road. You can just, you know, give them something else later, but, you know, give them support. But if, you know, if they shine and they're able to do well, then they're, you know, your future leaders, that when a vacancy comes up, or even could be in another department, you know, you put forward that person, you say, hey, I think this person would be great for that role. And it's the same with the RSS, because to some extent we do that, you know, when you're at the conference, you meet all these people. We had, was it 700 people or so at the conference, Sarah, this time around, and you meet all these great people and you have all these conversations, and I'll wander around and just talk to anybody, and it's amazing what you pick up. And then you think, oh, that person would be brilliant. That person would be really good volunteer on something. So, you know, the Future Leaders one, I think, is a brilliant initiative, because it enables us to go deeper in the organization, which maybe we wouldn't normally go into. And then we're finding people that have got great potential. And that's what we're trying to do, is grow that potential so that they can be leaders in the organization. So we're not looking at that first level. We're going much deeper in the organization. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I you did mention networking earlier on, and I'm glad that it has come up again in this sense, that it's a strategy that people also be able to actually once you network with them, they're actually able to remember to say they talked to you somewhere, and they remember that you said ABCD, and they think that it could be great for a particular a particular role. So that's interesting because my networking skills are really bad. But having heard from both of you, I think I'm going to work on that.
You know what, Edith, though,
So
my networking skills are really poor as well. I'm the first to admit I'm a really poor networker, and I just have to force myself to do it. And it's a lot easier if you're like the president of the RSS, because you can just go up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm the president of the RSS," and somebody's going to talk to you. But most people are really generous with their time, and I think it's just having the courage to go and introduce yourself. And what's the worst that can happen? They can say,
mhm.
they can be not that interested, and you move on to somebody else. And I think it's just be courageous, give it a go. It's not the end of the world. If it doesn't come off, you move on to somebody else. But just be prepared to go and talk to people and be curious.
I
Thank you
agree,
for
and
that.
maybe Edith, it's the difference between something that you're bad at and something that you don't naturally enjoy, and just think about the difference in framing of those two things. That might help.
Thank you, thank you. I would definitely keep that in the back of my head. So I know we've probably already picked around this, but this is our final question, and it will go to each one of you. What is your one piece of advice towards being a successful leader? Shall I start with you, Andy?
Okay, if you permit me, I've got two pieces of advice here. So I think the first one is listening. I think listening skills are really important, and being able to ask open questions. And I went on a course, would you believe, many years about counseling within a company. And I do think that was a sort of bit of a revelation. You also start to identify when people are using the techniques on yourself as well. So you can see what they're trying to do. But I think just listening to people is really important if you're in a leadership position. And asking open questions, so that when I talked about those sort of skip meetings, that probing, trying to find out a little bit more about what's really at the heart of maybe some of the challenges they've got. And then it's going to tie in nicely with the fact that Sarah, in particular with Jen Rogers, worked really hard on the strategy for the RSS. I'm a great believer in having a strategy and knowing where you want to get to. And I think broadly speaking, people want to see you as a leader, as having a strategy, knowing where you're trying to get to, and then not keeping that in a drawer, but having that guide your day-to-day decision making. So it might be that you don't have to, every time you make a decision, it doesn't have to be aligned with your strategy, but you should understand if it isn't, why it isn't. And so I think have a strategy, and then when you have to make a decision, go back to your strategy and think, is this aligned with where we want to get to? Is it going to help us get to that position, or is it going to take us somewhere else? So they're the two things: is open questions and listen, and then I think have a strategy and make sure you use it to guide your day-to-day decision making.
Thank you for that. Sarah?
Some really good advice from Andy there. Two pieces that definitely struck a chord with me. I'm going to go with building resilience as a leader, because things don't always go to plan, and it can be those experiences that bring the richest sources of learning and can support our development as leaders. But that's only possible. It's only possible to have the strength to learn if you've got strategies in place to weather the storm, and that means making sure that you know what helps you stay afloat, that you've done the thinking about that before the storm is upon you, so that if things get tough, you can just roll out those support mechanisms, and you know who to go to, you know what to do in terms of exercise, sleep, diet, etc. So that you can be that leader. Because things are not always easy, and just because you see a leader and it might look easy, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of frantic paddling under the surface of the water to get where they are, and they can only do it if they're resilient.
Thank you so much for that. I think all of those pieces of advice sort of complement very well with what we have talked about today, and I have certainly learned a lot from both of you, and I appreciate this opportunity to have to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Well, absolute privilege. So it's been fabulous to take part in it. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us both. Thank you.
And thank you from me too, Edith. You've been a great interviewer. Thank you.
Yeah. Back to you, Ricky.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you all for being involved. Edith, thanks for those great questions, and Andy and Sarah for such enriched answers. There's some really great takeaways there. Some common themes coming out of our other interviews as well. So a lot about networking, the benefits you can get from it, how it's beneficial for everyone involved. People like talking about their experiences, and you learn from learning about those experiences, and that can. There's a lot of talk about feeling confidence in networking, approaching it, and I think it's definitely something that feels more familiar over time. And that brings us on to volunteering, because I think volunteering naturally brings some familiarity with the environment and the way of networking as well. And you sort of start to naturally network without realizing you are. And so some really good opportunities there. I love the skip meetings idea. I've seen it myself at other organizations. I think they work really well about identifying talent early on. And I think it's really beneficial for the individuals taking part in those skip meetings as well, because it brings them a lot of exposure to the kind of questions someone hiding them are asking, the what, the why, what they're interested in, and it also brings familiarity with those individuals as well. So when they do come to make that leap and that change, walking into those meeting rooms, it isn't so scary for them, because they've had conversations at a level they've started to build an understanding. So all those things are really, really, really good pieces of advice. So I've lots of good nuggets there to take away. So again, as we're running to time, I'll leave you all there and just say another thank you. And I look forward to putting this interview out, and we'll keep you all informed as to when that will be. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ricky. Thanks all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.